Welcome visitor, my name is Declan and this is 13th part of the WoW Player's Diary. Playing on the Gorduni realm from November 209 to February 210 was a honeymoon period. After that, the downsides started creeping in, and the longer I played, the more of them I found. In the end, it all came down to performance and ratings. Raiding in WoW is a core gameplay. The most important action in the game revolves around raids. They serve as primary indicator of character progress at level cap, and generally the biggest dramas in WoW are all about raiding. As I said before, I moved to Gorduni realm because I wanted more serious raid progression and a more engaging experience with that content. At first, it really delivered, but as they say, things weren't quite well as they seemed. I wrote a post back in October 209 about casual raiding, where I summed up my experience in the Travelers of Azeroth guild on the Moonglade server. It was a typical casual guild that wasn't pushing the progress but was, as they say, playing for fun. After 4 months of playing in my new guild, the Night Watch, I finally understood what it meant to be a casual on progression server like Gorduni. In an old article about WoW raiding, a writer mentioned that it's hard to get into a good group without connections. Reynolds, the player who invited me to Travelers of Azeroth, said almost the same thing. He had spent a couple of months on a high progress server before returning to casual life on Moonglade. Honestly, if it weren't for my friend Duelmaster, I probably wouldn't have been accepted into Night Watch. I saw the applications from other candidates on the guild forum and how they were discussed. The feedback was fair but harsh. Well, sure, I wasn't making obvious mistakes like socketing intellect gems in my gear, but I didn't have much experience either. Of course, everything I describing reflects the realities of over a decade ago. Before looking for a raid, flexible raids or connected realm existed. Nevertheless, some things in this game don't change. So, here are the pros and cons of raiding on progression server as it was back then. One of the clear advantages was seeing the content then it was still relevant. Icecrown Citadel was the first raid I entered on opening day, not 2 months later. Another benefit was the efficiency of learning and farming. On a top server, nobody spent an entire evening wiping on the faction champions in a trial of the Crusader, getting frustrated and then arguing about it on a guild forum. We rushed through TOC 10 in a half an hour and the first 5 bosses of ICC 10 in a little over an hour. This meant my limited free time was used much more efficiently than in casual guild. The second advantage was the experience I gained. It's better to participate in a fight once than to watch on YouTube video 10 times. To truly understand an encounter, you need to fight the boss 4 or 5 times. It's even better if there are experienced players in a guild willing to offer advice instead of just criticizing a bad build. Taking with skilled players is far more useful than reading online guides. I gained much more experience in terms of improving my own gameplay, understanding boss mechanics and figuring out my role in the fights. Well, now for downsides. While the standard content was found without any issues, on heroic difficulty things were a different story, especially while learning the encounters. It was wipes, wipes and more wipes. In a casual guild, wiping on a difficult boss didn't cause much irritation. But in a progression guild it created tension which led to raid leader yelling in ventrilo or TeamSpeak, penalties and raids running long. I remember trying to down Hodir. We wiped on him all evening, but strangely there was no real tension. After the 4th or 5th try, everyone understood what to do and was practicing their roles. When the raid time was up, the raid leader called it for the night. Our best attempt had him around 40% health. I'm sure if we had played for a couple more hours, we would have killed him. But we were casuals, we didn't need progress, and healthy night's sleep was more important than 10 achievement points and some purple pixels in our backs. In a progression guild, you wipe until you succeed or collapse. The stress level is much higher and the attitude toward progress is completely different. After some of those raid nights, I asked myself, why the hell do I need this? I have enough stress in real life, so why should I seek it out in the game? The skill level of top players on top servers is much higher. The issue wasn't just the skill level, but the attitude of top tier players who could pull a hell of DPS and humiliate anyone who can't keep up. Even a small difference in damage or healing was enough to get you called out for being at the bottom of meters. The feeling of being left behind creeps up on you. Hearing people in chat discussing a boss kill you haven't even attempted yet will make you feel uncomfortable. And then there is the habit of living by raids lockout. You see trade chats spammed with messages like LFM, ICC 10, experience, ignore crap with only siege experience. You feel like you don't have time, you are constantly farming heroics, looking for randoms for Vault of Acheron, and burning your lookouts with randoms just to get another piece of gear that will add up a few points to your gear score. Real endgame raiding is like surfing. You have to be on the crest of the waves or somewhere close, otherwise you won't even get a spot in a random for your crabby gear. This social pressure is another hook that makes you log in regularly. Run the same boring Utgard the Pinnacle or the Nexus until you're sick of it and look for the group for a weekly raid where once formidable bosses are now torn to pieces in minutes. And for what? Mostly for emblems of frost. There is no longer any pressure in the victory. If I had to summarize this wall of text, the picture that emerges is simple. I was a stranger among of my own. I just didn't fit in the environment. I was clearly a lower skill level and I didn't have the time to farm for 6 or 7 hours a day to gear up several alts. The further I went, the stronger the feeling that I was in the wrong place became. The situation got worse in March, and Dollmaster had to deal with the personal problems and stopped leading his static, handing over guild management in someone else. During the months that Dollmaster was gone, I got but mainly these random groups, managing to get into the main guild raid only once because attendance was low that evening. Long story short, I left the Night's Watch. No, it wasn't because I was fed up with comments about my gear or DPS. The people in the guild were mostly polite, and I'm thankful they took me on raids and helped me with the advice. But I wasn't one of them, frankly. I never intended to be. So, stranger in a stranger land. I didn't want to join a Russian-speaking equivalent of my old casual guild. The memory of wiping on the faction champions was still fresh, and I knew exactly what to expect. Besides, there weren't many truly casual guilds on Gonduni anyway. In April, Dollmaster returned to the game, but not as the guild master of Night Watch. He started putting together a new guild and led a static for ICC 10. The static wasn't exactly top tier. Typically, a core of 6 or 7 of us would gather around 8 p.m. and then Doll would spend a long, tedious time looking for a few more players to fill remaining spots. Once we had our randoms, we headed into ICC and fight the bosses with varying degrees of success. It should also be noted that starting on March 210, a buff was added to ICC that strengthened players, and initially the damage and healing buff was 5%, a month later it was 10%, and by the end of May it reached 20%. By the way, it was only after this buff the Finnish guild Paragon finally defeated Lich King on 25-man heroic. The fully geared Paragon managed to defeat him without the buff at the end of July. However, the randoms going after Lich King, even the buff wasn't enough, and our static continued to wipe on him until the beginning of June. The static did eventually manage to kill him in a 10-man version, but it happened without me. I ended up leaving the static because Radiant Heroics didn't appeal me at all, and there were some personal reasons I didn't want to play with that turn team anymore. By the summer of 210 I was not a member of any guild, any raid team, and left with a fair amount of disappointment in the end game on a progression server and in my own abilities as a raider. So what's the lessons learned? I never played in a top PvE realm again. I transferred several times to Russian realms and European ones, forth and back, but never it was a top PvE server. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. To be continued.